it's one of those supplements where they promise you everything. And whenever I start seeing that, where it does everything, build muscle, burn fat, healthy gut, healthy this, I immediately, all my radar and bells and whistles go off in my head. And I say, oh, it's one of those. It's the do all. In other words, it's the supplement you can't be without, right? So everyone's going to at least try it once, right? Because it's doing everything. And that's how these companies make money. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever is rattling around in your mind, be it bodybuilding, be it non-bodybuilding, be it diet training, supplementation, anything related to the IFBB Pro League, Arnold Classic just about 2.5 months away. Whatever's on your mind, it is all on the table. We are about a few days from really getting the ball rolling on previewing the Arnold Classic. We're waiting on a couple of confirmations. I know that Andrew Jack got his confirmation. I think it may have been a visa issue, so he got that confirmed. So he will, in fact, be present. Because you remember when they first released the competition list, there were 3 names, I believe. It was Andrew Jack, Hadi Chupon, and Rubiel Mosquera, Nexzilla, that had pending next to their names. Right. So I think now the question is whether or not Hadi can get his visa. I don't want to say issue, but if he can get that
like he's here all the time. Doesn't he seem like he's always here training with Hani Ramba?
He's not. No, Dave, there's a little bit of misinformation floating around right now, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So there's a video we actually posted, a clip from that video on our Instagram, and a lot of other outlets kind of just blankly said that that's Hadi 7 weeks out. That was from Dubai. Right. So this was around Thanksgiving break, right? Because this was for the Dubai Muscle Show, because you saw Phil Heath was in that video, Hani Rambod was in that video. So Phil and Hani were there in Dubai for the Dubai Muscle Show.
They took a bunch of clips. I see what you're saying.
Right, exactly. So they made a training video together. Now, again, for all these other media outlets just saying that's Hadi 7 weeks out. Dave, you know how, let's be very real about one thing.
Yeah.
Let's be very real. If we had said that was 7 weeks out for Hadi, somebody would have grabbed a clip of that, made memes about it, and that was about 11 weeks ago. But RxMuscle knows nothing. But everybody else could do it and just incorrectly state it, and that's fine. So, but anyway, that was
close enough that it doesn't even matter, though, Sid. I guarantee he probably looks the same, if not better than that. So,
but anyway, so. Hopefully that all gets resolved and you'll have Hadi there. You'll have Rubiel there. That'll be exciting to see Rubiel standing up against some of the world's best, the defending champion, Samson Dauda. Obviously, Hadi Chopin, 1 year removed from his Olympia title and then finishing and runner-up. So it'll be exciting. So again, a lot of reasons for optimism. Again, all that programming, all the preview programming starting in just a matter of a few days. Let's go to the questions. The first 2 questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, very simple and short. NPP versus Deca.
I get this question all the time. And the truth of the matter is they're very similar drugs. We always kind of said that nandrolone phenylpropionate is kind of like a faster acting Deca. Deca-durabolin is really just nandrolone decanoate, which is the ester, the linkage, the second word. They're both nandrolone, but it's how it's attached. One is a long acting, one is a short acting. But For some reason, they don't have the same properties when you attach them to these esters. Now, I didn't do well in organic chemistry, so I never pretend to know more than I know. But I'll tell you this, that regular Deca, the long-acting Deca Durable and Nandrolone Decanoate, is a much, much better anti-inflammatory. So if you like, one of the reasons I take Deca and took it back in the day was the fact that it made my joints feel really good. And I could train heavier, especially, when the diet first started. Also, that used to be a real helpful little thing, especially as my shoulders got worse. So I didn't ever feel that from Nandrolone phenylpropionate. I just didn't. And I personally, I don't think there's any less side effects from taking NPP than there is from taking Deca. So to me, there's no reason to use the short-acting one because it just falls short on the anti-inflammatory thing. Now, I know women try to rationalize, well, I could take the NPP because it doesn't last as long in my system. I won't get as many side effects. And that's not true either. You get the same side effects. It's the same drug. It's still in your system. It's just not as long. It's not like it's a water-based drug where it's in and out, the same day. It's still lingering. So you're still being exposed to it. So women shouldn't really use Deca. I mean, if you decide to go there as a woman and make that step, you have to understand that you're going to probably get some side effects from it, deepening voice, and everyone responds a little differently. So some people get side effects, some people don't. You kind of rolling the dice in that respect. As far as a man goes, I don't see any benefit to using NPP unless you just can't get the long-acting Deca. The good thing is a lot of these rejuvenation clinics and the life extension clinics, they will prescribe Deca because it's an American-made drug and they can compound it and legally prescribe it, especially if you have joint issues. So I know Titan will prescribe it if you have a documented orthopedic issues. So to me, it's a better option.
Second question, again, these questions are from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. What's the macro difference from a woman to man by percentage on your macro percentage, thereby their body weight? I'm not sure if I understand the question. The macro difference from a woman to man by percentage on your macro, I guess your macro percentage, right. Micro percentage times or by their body weight.
Look, women tend to weigh a lot less than men. Okay, let's assume you got a woman who weighs 140 pounds in the off season. Okay, and she's trying to put muscle on, and then you got a guy who weighs 280. The guy is double her weight. Yet when I see some of these diets that I see these women on, they're eating a lot more. They're eating a lot more than food than you would think. They're almost eating as much as the guy's eating, and then they wonder why they put on body fat. So women don't eat as much food, and also women tend to have slower metabolisms, and they have a better ability to retain muscle. And I don't know if it's due to a genetic, aspect, or if it's actually due to estrogen, or it's just due to the fact that they have better receptors than we do because they're more sensitive because they have such a small amount of testosterone. But whatever the case is, women don't lose muscle. As long as you feed them a little bit of protein every couple hours, you can starve them to death almost, and give them really low calories. They do not lose muscle, which is great because it makes it easier. The problem is that they have to suffer usually. There are a couple of genetic freaks, but usually women have to suffer more to lose the weight. But if you think about it, and like he's saying, in terms of percentages of their body weight, they're really not suffering more. It just seems like they are, but they should be eating a lot. If I'm eating 8 ounces, if I'm a 260-pound bodybuilder, and I'm eating 8 ounces, of protein, and I'm eating, 25 grams of fat, and I'm eating, 50 grams of carbs per meal, then if I'm a woman at half that weight, I should be eating half of that. And for some reason, they don't eat half. They eat more than half. They don't eat 4 ounces of protein. They eat 6 ounces of protein or 5 ounces. And they don't eat, half the fat. They eat, a little bit more than half. So sometimes they don't get the results given, what they think they need to eat. There is a suffering component to dieting. And I can't overstate that. And unfortunately, usually in my experience, and I've worked with a lot of men and women tend to have to suffer a little bit more, do a little bit more cardio, take a little bit more fat burners to get the same results as a man. It's just the fact. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just acknowledging it so that you know what you have to do. The good thing is that women don't have to worry about, oh my God, I'm going to lose muscle. If I starve a guy and give him too little food, he will, or if I train him too much, he will lose muscle. So as a coach, you have to know when to kind of crack the whip and when to pull back a little bit, to let the person's body recover.
So again, these two questions were from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. We now take questions from our Facebook page and our Instagram page. If you're not already following us on Facebook, just go into the search bar, type in RxMuscle. On Instagram, official_RxMuscle. I want to make sure I got the pronunciation of this correct. It's AstraGin or AstraGin.
What is this for? Like a GH brand?
It's the astragalus root extract, and I guess it goes by AstraGin or AstraGin. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay.
So it's for nutrient absorption and gut health. That's what the question is about.
Yeah.
So anyways, the question is that this user came across AstraGin online for the first time, noticed that none of the supplements that he uses have AstraGin in it. Does it really help with nutrient absorption?
I've been asked this question, like people email me questions all the time. I answer everyone's questions all the time. And someone asked me about this before, and I kind of did a little research and I looked it up, and I was like, it's one of those supplements where they promise you everything. And whenever I start seeing that, where it does everything, build muscle, burn fat, healthy gut, healthy this, I immediately, all my radar and bells and whistles go off in my head, and I say, oh, it's one of those. It's the do all. In other words, it's the supplement you can't be without, right? So everyone's going to at least try it once, right? Because it's doing everything. And that's how these companies make money. Now, I haven't used it, so I don't know. So I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but I'm just telling you, in my experience in this industry, and I've been around the industry over 30 years now, the supplements that promise you everything never do everything, okay? And while some of them may actually have some function, usually it's a sales pitch. So, I mean, you could try it, but, those supplements never last the test of time, Creatine promised this is what it does. It gave you the science of it. It was two things. It was a volumizing agent. It was an endurance agent for the muscles, and it worked. And it's still around 30 years later, and it's still doing the same thing that it promised, and all the research that backs it up. So I would tread lightly on that product. I don't think it's going to pan out the way people think it will.
Let's go to Ari Givany. Lack of sex drive on TRT. What would be the cause of this? What can one do to improve, I guess, sex drive while on TRT?
It amazes me when people tell me that, because if you go from nothing, where let's say you're low, and I'm assuming you're going on TRT, you're boosting your testosterone by quite a bit. I don't know why people would lose their sex drive. Now, there is a couple of possibilities. A lot of times when people do take HRT, the clinic they're using will give them an estrogen aromatase inhibitor, like a Arimidex or Femara. And sometimes it lowers their estrogen too much. Low estrogen will definitely can kill your sex drive. But that's why I usually tell people, if you're on HRT, I probably wouldn't take like a Arimidex unless you're just a super crazy high estrogen converter. And on blood work, that's confirmed. Like you take 200 milligrams a week and you got like a 600 or 800, estrogen level. That's too high. But if you're in the normal or even in the high normal range, maybe even a little over, I probably wouldn't use it. I'd probably use a product like my Testalize product, which will limit DHT a little bit and will get rid of some estrogen, but not too much. And that's just an easier way to go. 3 pills twice a day. But that's usually the problem. Now, there are people who will sometimes stack other things with their HRT. Like, oh, I'm taking a little Deca, or I'm taking a little Trenbolone. Well, when you do that, those drugs raise prolactin levels. And prolactin can inhibit erections and can cause also some sex drive weirdness. So that's something to consider too. But this person is only indicating that they're on HRT. So I don't know why they would lose it. Now, having said that, I want to just make one statement. When you first start HRT, what it does initially is it shuts down your body. But it could, especially if you're taking Sipin and Anthate, but it could take 2 to 3 weeks before the Sipin and Anthate actually build up to high enough levels where they're higher than what your natural levels were. So there might be like a lag period of 2-3 weeks when you first start taking it, that your sex drive might be a little down, but once it builds up in your system, that should be overridden. So he didn't really indicate how long he'd been on the HRT. That's something to consider. I also want to just state, I want to thank everyone because, our the Dave Palumbo Experience app has been getting a lot of traffic lately. I know a lot of people joined. I want to thank you for supporting it. I hope everyone's enjoying it. I answer everyone's questions in an open forum in there. Pick the best questions. We do a Q&A video on the app. We put up a workout every week, and every video and everything I've ever written is in that app too. So it's a great resource. You can download that at iTunes or Android store. Thank you for that.
Let's go to, I'm going to try to save this one to the end of the show. There's another one here from our Facebook list. Oh, from Rick Harbens or Harbens. He wants you to discuss muscle building genetics. And then he says, and muscle insertions and bone thickness. So I guess as those relate as far as the overall picture of muscle building genetics.
Say that one more time.
So he wants you to talk about muscle building genetics overall, but then I guess as a corollary to that, he's talking also about muscle insertions and bone thickness.
I think I guess both components are genetic in a sense, because if you have good muscle building genetics, in other words, the ability to add muscle to your body in response to resistance training, I mean, there's a genetic component to that. We all know that. Some people grow better than others. Some people grow faster than others. That's completely separate from what your structure is. So you might have a horrible structure for bodybuilding, but you might add muscle real easily, and you might get big, and you might even get really lean real easily, but it might not look that good. Whereas there might be another person who has great structural genetics. In other words, they have wide clavicles, they have a small waist, they have a good sweep, they have that X frame, and they may not put muscle on easily at all. And so they might have a great shape, but they never have enough muscle. But every once in a while, you get someone who comes along that can do both. Kevin Levrone, Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, Flex Wheeler, Phil Heath. And those are the guys that rise to the top, and they win, the titles. And that's just the way bodybuilding works. There's a huge genetic component that you cannot overcome. That's your insertions, your ability to put muscle on. And then there's hard work. If you can combine all those things in one, you get the superstars. And so that's just how it works. I had above average genetics. Obviously, I had very good genetics for getting lean and ripped and vascular. And my work ethic enabled me to put on massive amounts of muscle and be impressive looking. But I wasn't structurally as good as the names I mentioned before, so I couldn't beat those guys. And that's just the way it is. It's tiered, At the very top, it's a small percentage of people that are up there. And that's just reality. And it's hard as a bodybuilder because you give 100% to the sport you love. And at some point, you realize, and it takes a while until you get to that top, until you add all that muscle to your body, you realize, you know what? I don't think I'm going to win that. I don't think I'm going to win the Olympia. I better have a plan B, Or some people just like competing, There are guys that just are happy to win, the qualifier shows or place top 5. And that would have been me, if I would have turned pro. I would have been more than happy to place top 5 at like New York Pro or something like that if I could do it. And other people, their goal is to win. If they can't win, they don't want to compete. So it really is very individualistic. And it's a hard question to answer because I don't want to tell anyone that you can't be a great bodybuilder, because a lot of people don't even know what their genetics are until they actually try. So try to be the best you can be, see what comes of it.
Let's go to Jose Luis Robello. How to deal with test prop soreness and inflammation in the site injection?
Test propionate is nasty stuff. It really, early in my career, I was able to take a little test propionate, and I don't know if it was buffered differently when it was made by the American, pharmaceutical companies, but probably the second half of my career, if I took one shot of test propionate, I would get flu-like symptoms. I would get a fever. Wherever I injected it, the injection site would be like, it felt like someone hit me with a hammer there. My whole arm would be swollen, or my glute or my lat, wherever I put it. And I just at some point said to myself, this is not worth it. There's plenty of other testosterone. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to take long-acting testosterone like Cipra and Athate. Doesn't hurt. I have no problems with it. It keeps my blood levels real stable. There's no reason to use propionate. Testosterone is testosterone. And that was the conclusion I came to. I never had another problem. Now, every once in a while, I took a shot of something and I felt that soreness, and I knew that whatever I was taking probably had prop in it, and maybe it was fake or something like that. But some people, I know guys who could take test propionate, they have no problem with it whatsoever. But it does seem that everyone has a little bit of sensitivity to it. How much sensitivity you have is really determined, individualistically. So if it hurts, don't use it. There's plenty of other testosterones to use.
Let's go to Dwayne B. Best water or juice for taking creatine? I've heard juice gets into the muscle faster. Any truth to this?
We back in the day, we used to use grape juice. We would do 2 servings a day of creatine. So I would do in the morning. I would do some creatine and a little grape juice because the grape juice actually has glucose as opposed to most fruit juices that are fructose. So glucose stimulates insulin release and supposedly drives the creatine into the muscle cell. Toward the end of my career, in the middle of my career, I started saying, you know what, I'm just going to use my shake. If I'm doing a shake post-workout, because all of a sudden the high molecular weight carbohydrates came about, like Targo, and then I made my Carbolize. So once that was available, I'm like, well, that spikes insulin more than even juice does. So the grape juice does. So I would just throw 5 grams of creatine into my, Carbolize and Isolized shake, and after in post workout, and just replace whatever I lost during the workout. And that I to this day I tell people to do that. That works perfectly. So there's no reason to actually have to do a separate creatine drink or shake. Just add it into your post workout shake. If you're dieting and you're not doing a post workout shake, you can just do it, in the morning with a meal or whatever. If you're going to eat a meal that has any amount of carbs, even, it could be 5 grams, you're going to get some insulin release. So it doesn't matter, and everything has some carbs in it, even if you're on a ketogenic diet. So you don't have to get so carried away. You don't need, 100 units of insulin to absorb 5 grams of creatine. You probably 10 grams of carbs would cause you enough insulin release in your body for you to absorb it. So don't be so overly concerned with it. It's not that important.
Show day related question from Bilal Hamide. If you're someone who sweats a lot, what could go wrong on show day after you get your tan application?
Usually, if someone's dry, when I mean dry, I mean you've dehydrated yourself, you've taken the diuretics, you're not holding any water under the skin. Usually, sweating at that point is not usually, it's like a moot point. It's not going to happen. However, some people get very nervous. Other people get low blood sugar. Now, sometimes the nerves can initiate the low blood sugar, because if you get nervous and you release adrenaline, it can drop your blood sugar. And you know what happens when you get that cold sweat? It doesn't, it's like you don't even know where the water is coming from. I've had it at the gym where I had low blood sugar. I was like doing cardio. I'm like, holy, I don't think I'm going to be able to finish this cardio. And I'm in this, my shirt is soaked. I'm like, where is this water coming from? Because the cold sweat that comes from low blood sugar is you can't stop it. That's one of the reasons why I don't like telling people to use sugars backstage. Some people ask me, should I do some simple sugars before I get on stage? It gives me some vascularity, gives me a pump. I'm like, the problem with that is if you're on stage too long, and when you eat sugars, your body releases a huge surge of insulin, and then it drops your blood sugar after about 15 minutes or so. So you risk going low blood sugar on stage when you do that, and then there's no coming back from that. Then all of a sudden, the water just pours, your tan runs off you, and you start looking terrible. So my suggestion is to try to stick to a little bit more complex carbs. I usually tell people to do like rice cakes and peanut butter backstage, because those are like longer acting. The peanut butter kind of slows the absorption of the carbs, and you're not going to get that huge surge of insulin and that huge surge of sugar into the blood. So, experiment. I always tell people, play around with it, see how your body responds. But if you're a nervous person, definitely don't do simple sugars.
Let's go to Nick DeLeo, training related question. And we do get a lot of, I guess, inquiries related to training. So perhaps that is something that you and I did discuss a couple of days ago. Yeah. Maybe we'll do some more training footage or more training related content going forward, individualized videos. So anyway, the question is, when bench pressing, do you believe in slightly arching your back, elbows tucked in, and using leg drive to perform the exercise?
If you're a power lifter, yeah. I think that's a good technique. For bodybuilding purposes, the ideal form that I've experienced where I got the best results is, yes, you always want to keep your chest up, arched up, and your scapula back, because that kind of pins you to the bench and it forces the pec muscles to work. Because once your shoulders round forward, the front delts take over. So you always want your chest up. I always keep the elbows out to the side. That's the bodybuilding movement. The powerlifting movement is this way because you're stronger, because you can use your triceps too. We're not worried about strength when we're bodybuilding. We're trying to maximize the upper pecs or whatever pecs you're using, for whether it be flat bench or incline bench. And so elbows out to the side, chest up, and squeeze up with the bar. And come all the way down, touch your chest, have a spotter there, especially if you're lifting heavy. And to me, that's the best way to do it. If you're driving from, should you use your legs? I mean, your legs are your platforms to keep you balanced. But, you shouldn't feel like your quads just got to work out when the bench is over with. Usually if you're having to use your whole body to strain the weight up, you're cheating. Okay. Now for bench pressing purposes, if you're trying to lift maximal weights, that's a good idea. But if you're trying to, isolate a muscle to get maximum development, but for bodybuilding purposes, my set was always done when I couldn't, when the muscle couldn't work anymore. When the muscle's at failure, I might get my training partner to help me with an extra rep or so, but then it's over, because otherwise I'm going to start rolling my shoulders. I'm going to start using my legs, and I'm going to cheat. And more than likely, I'm probably going to hurt myself, which is what you don't want. So yeah, you want to limit the cheating. You want to try to maintain form, have a good spotter to help you get a little extra, maybe a rep or two extra out of the set without having to let your form deteriorate. Because once form deteriorates, it sets up bad habits, and then you're not really working the muscle you want. You're working the accessory muscles, and then you don't get so you think you're stronger, but you're really not, because you're not really using the muscles you need
to. Nico Cantemir, if you're in 130 grams of carbs spread over 5 meals and a 6th with no carbs, 30-minute cardio, 5 days a week, you lose weight gradually. Do you think it's necessary to change change from that to a keto pre-contest?
It depends how your body's responding. If your body responds to that and you feel good on it, you can stick to it. Look, my whole thing is that, we all know you need high protein. There's no doubt. There's no debating that. Okay. And you do need some essential fats, right? I mean, there's a certain essential fatty acid requirements. You can't go zero fat. I mean, not every day at least. And you should certainly be taking an essential fatty acid supplement like Omega-Lyze, whether you're on a zero fat day or not, because that's stuff that your body needs for repairing muscles, for making certain hormones, et cetera, et cetera. Having said that, okay, if you're doing that, okay, on a regular basis, then I forgot the question.
No, so he goes on about his current regimen, right? 5 days a week.
Yeah. So I'm saying, right. If that's working for you, then you don't have to
keto pre-contest.
Right. If that's working for you, you don't have to go lower than that. Now, if you're not losing weight, given that, okay, those macros, then you're going to have to change something. So what I do is with my guys is I do something similar to that. I give them carbs with protein, with a little bit of fat. And then what I do is if I feel like they're not losing or they got stuck, I might every third day or every second day, I might give them a low day where they're not eating any direct source of starchy carbs. So they're doing protein and fat. And that's that low day depletes them down really well. And it usually initiates some more fat burning. And then the next day they're back on carbs again. So they still have the energy they need. Their body doesn't even know that they were on no carbs the day before. A lot of times they feel even better because the keto days where they're doing protein and fat is actually higher calories. There's just no direct source of starchy carbs. So that seems to work well. And people like it because it adds a little diversity to the diet. Because if you're doing the same diet and just varying carbs throughout the day, okay, some days you're eating high carbs, some days you're eating low carbs, but it's the same diet, it can get boring. Okay, it can get a little boring. So the ketogenic with the carb diet kind of alternating kind of makes it a little easier. And you're gradually transitioning so that even if I get to a point where I have to give you more fat days than carb days, it's not a big deal because you've done it over a very long, slow transition. And that's the key. It's to make the changes based on what you're seeing in the person's physique. Sometimes I get to a point where they're eating 3 or 4 no carb days in a row, and then the weight loss stops. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to give them more carbs because now their metabolism might be shutting down a little bit. So I play with that. And that's what a good coach does. There's no set in stone way to do it. I can give you templates in the Dave Palumbo Experience app to follow. But after a while, you have to modify them based on who you're working with. And that's the key. So if something works, though, don't change it. I have people I've worked with. They're like, you haven't changed the diet in 10 weeks. I said, you've lost 2 pounds every single week for the last 10 weeks. Why would I change it? It's working perfectly. He goes, it feels too easy. I said, well, you're lucky because once I have to start giving you a lot of cardio and changing the diet, you're not going to be happy anymore. So be thankful that it's working. And so, sometimes we have this mentality as bodybuilders where we think we need to suffer more, but sometimes you don't have to. I've worked with people where I tortured them 3 years in a row. And then the 4th year we worked together, it was the easiest diet of all time. It's because they built a lot more muscle. Their metabolism was better. They got used to the diet and now it works great. So you just don't know. You have to base what you do with someone based on how their body responds.
Let's go to Chad Schultz or Schultz. What would you recommend for someone who has had a PSA score in the high 4s, low 5s for the past 3 years?
I mean, I'm assuming they probably got an ultrasound of their prostate done, maybe even a biopsy. I mean, if the doctor says you're good and you don't have prostate cancer, I mean, a simple biopsy, I mean, no one wants to get a biopsy of their prostate. I mean, they're going to stick a needle in there. But I mean, if your PSA is high and the doctor's concerned and your prostate is enlarged, I would get a biopsy because the biopsy will tell you yes or no. Some people just have enlarged prostates. Usually the PSA doesn't go up from just an enlarged prostate. It usually goes up because there is potentially, some cancer cells in there, but not always. There are things like inflammatory, and inflammation can cause the PSA to go up. Like if you got prostatitis, which would be like a small infection of your prostate, that would jack the PSA up high. You would think, oh my God, I'm going to die of cancer, but you don't have cancer. You just have an infection in there. So you have to kind of diagnose what's going on. It's hard for me to make a blanket statement about what's going on with your prostate without seeing all the data and all the test results. But you should certainly definitely get an ultrasound of that. And you should maybe, and like I said, if the doctor's concerned, get a biopsy. Or if you're concerned, get a biopsy, because that'll tell you, one way or another what's going on. If the doctor doesn't seem worried about it and he's like, let's just keep an eye on it, then I wouldn't worry, because PSAs go up and down all the time. Like I said, it's based on inflammation a lot of times in that prostate.
We had a question earlier about injection sites. Those questions from NY Bigger, kind of a more expansive question to the previous one. Is it possible that as you get older, your injection sites become more sensitive? I've been pinning for decades, or only dorsogluteal site, and find that in my older years, that site has become very sensitive. I only pin 1 cc once a week, and after each shot, that area is so sensitive that I can't pin it again the following week. I have to alternate sides, which is fine. Is this just a normal part of aging? When I was younger, I could pin 2 to 3 cc's per glute multiple times a week.
I guess to answer that question, I always say, Chris Aceto and I talk about this. We talk about young, fresh-looking muscle. When you see a guy who's in his like 22, 23, and they got this beautiful round muscle, there's no bumps and lumps in it because they haven't taken that many shots. The longer you inject into a place, scar tissue invariably builds up. It's impossible. Even if you do a perfect injection every time, deep in the muscle, you're going to get scar tissue building up, and that can irritate the nerve. And then what you do is you're putting fluid in there over and over and over again, and it can just irritate what's going on in there. So yes, if you're doing repetitive injection sites in the same area, even if you're doing sterile technique, and even if you're not putting too much in there, over time, it has nothing to do with age. It's just over time, repetitively doing it over and over. Now, if you were 60 years old and you decided to do your very first steroid cycle, you're not going to have pain in that area because all the muscle is nice and fresh and soft, and there's no scar tissue in there. It's just a matter of how long you've been doing it.
I promised we would hold this question off till the end. It's from Sarah Bogish. And I just wanted to point one thing out. On Facebook, again, these are certain features where, with Facebook fan pages, you have certain elements, right, to following a page. You get award certain things, like for instance, like top fan. Right now, obviously that would I guess entail that fan is a lot more engaged with our page. So you know what, for what it's worth, if they're going to ask a question on the show, we're going to give them preference, and that's just something that we do. We want as a thank you, and just something where, again, we appreciate all of your support, and furthermore, your constant feedback, to our posts, be it on Ask Dave or be it for any of the other content or show previews that we post throughout the course of the week. So the question is, and it's been one that you've been asked before, various parts of, well, had you turn pro, what next? So this question is, if you had gotten your pro card and competed in a pro show, well, today, if you had gotten your pro card today, how would you do? How would you place with the size and rib condition of your career? I mean, somebody, kind of said, well, they hand out pro cards. What's he going to say? You would have pro. It's not to say that if you have a pro card today and you're competing in today's era, if you competed 5-6 years as a professional, what would you have accomplished?
It's obviously it's totally speculative because I don't know. Let me qualify the question a little bit. Let's assume that I don't have shoulder injuries. Okay. So because the shoulder injuries cut my career short, it probably saved my life too, because maybe stop earlier than I probably would have. I probably would have gone another couple of years. But my shoulders were definitely, were very sore. And I didn't feel that I could be better than I was the year before because I couldn't pose them properly. I couldn't train them properly. So I stopped. But let's assume that I got a pro card and I didn't have shoulder issues. I think I probably could have snuck a couple top 5 placings in some of the smaller pro shows. I don't think I would have won, any pro shows. I just don't think that I had the structure to do it. I'm sure muscle size wise and conditioning wise, I could have hung with anyone. And if I would have hit a weak show, I could have done well. But I don't think I would have. It was probably better that I didn't get a pro card because that would have, if I would have gotten it, I would have felt obligated to compete, right? Because I want to do a New York Pro because it's Steve Weinberger's show. I'd like to get an invite to the Arnold. It would be one of those deals, and I probably would have stayed around too long, longer than I should have. So I believe everything happens for a reason. But yeah, I think I could have snuck out of 5th place maybe at some of these shows. Just looking at the shows today, and handicapping, and when Chris and I do the recaps on Heavy Muscle Radio, there have been a couple of shows that were, the guys were not that great at. And I think that I could have beat a couple of those guys. I'm not saying I would have placed at the Arnold or the Olympia. No way, no how. Those guys are much better than me. I would never even put myself in a class with them. But there were a couple of shows that, the lineups were pretty weak. And maybe I would have snagged the 5th place. So I believe me, I'm my own worst critic. I am the last person to say I would have done this or done that. When I look at pictures of myself, all I saw was flaws in my physique. I never saw like the good things, and that's what a good bodybuilder does. You can't look at yourself and say, "Wow, what a great physique I got," because then you'll never fix anything. You'll never get better. You always want to say, "Oh, I need more of this. I need more of that. I need more back. I need to pose better. I need to present myself better. I need a better tan." Whatever the case may be, you have to be critical of yourself. It would have been interesting. When I competed, I think it was a lot more competitive, in terms of and there weren't as many shows. So the fact that there's a lot more shows now, and they do that because there's more pros now, right? You got to have shows for these guys to do. Would have made it, if I would have picked the show properly, I could have, done pretty decently. But sometimes you pick a show and you think, oh, this is going to be a weak show, and everyone shows up at that show. There's no rhyme, no reason. You just got to get lucky. That's why sometimes you see guys win pro shows that you never thought would ever win a pro show. And it's not that they're a bad bodybuilder. It's just they picked the right show. They were in the best shape of their life, and no one else showed up in shape. So that's the advantage when there's a lot of pro shows. So I like that. I like that we can see guys that you wouldn't expect to make it to the Olympia making it there, because that's the highlight of their career for most of those guys, making it to the Olympia. They know they're never going to win the Olympia. They know they're never going to place top 5, maybe not even top 10. So for them, making it to the big show is a huge accolade. And I applaud all the guys that give 100% to the sport and achieve way more than people ever thought possible for them.
That is going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. But before we go, we'd be remiss if we did not send out a very special happy birthday shout out to a very special 8-year-old boy now, Logan Palumbo. It is Logan's 8th birthday. Happy birthday, Logan. For full disclosure, both Dave and I live in New York. Dave was visiting New York. I have something, I have no idea what. Dave tested positive today. So as you can imagine, the birthday celebrations are going to be a little bit moody today, being in quarantine. But Dave, I did want to allow you the opportunity to send your special man a little birthday shout out. Yeah,
he's 8 years old. I can't even believe it. I feel like it was yesterday he was born. I didn't want to start the show and saying I had COVID because I didn't want to make excuses like, oh, I have a headache and I can't answer questions, because me, I'll rise to the occasion. Doesn't matter how crappy I feel. It doesn't matter if I'm in the hospital. I will do the show must go on. That's my belief. So I don't know. I was at the gym earlier today and I said, I kind of feel like I have like a low grade headache, which reminded me of when I had COVID a couple of years ago. And I said, you know what? I don't want to endanger my kids or anything like that. It was bad enough I was around them yesterday, all day. So I went out and I got a test and I tested it. I tested positive. I think there's a lot of COVID in New York. I was supposed to see Janet Marsico, and I never went. I didn't go. Thank God she called me and said she had COVID. So I never even saw her. So I must have gotten it from someone else. Now, more than likely, the airplane is the worst place. If there's people who have COVID, you're breathing the same air as them. And that's more than likely why I got it. And this is why I didn't go traveling when COVID first came around, because I knew I was going to bring it home. It was inevitable. Everyone who went to the shows came back with it. I thought we were kind of past that, but who knows? I'm hoping that whatever I'm feeling now doesn't get any worse than this, and I can just kind of like ride it out for whatever, another week or so, And then when I test, clear again, I'll be good. But, I guess it was worth it because I had a really good time in New York and Connecticut with my sister and my family. So sometimes you got to take one for the team,
Well, feel better. And again, Logan, happy birthday. Have a great day and have a great year to come. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. Tell us what you think about this show and the other segments, the other formats that we have throughout the course of the week on the channel right now. All new episode of Heavy Muscle Radio, Dave from his hotel room and Chris Aceto, where they break down a picture. Dave posted on his Instagram, Dave being in Connecticut, went out to dinner. And the first thing is very obvious is that Dave looks like he's primed for a comeback. So Chris has some fun with that, breaking that down, the size of Dave's arm in that picture. Of course, breaking down the week that was in the bodybuilding world. And of course, all new episodes of the After Hours podcast, of the Confessional with Lee Priest and Jimmy the Bull. And then tomorrow, all new episode of the Dave Palumbo podcast. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.
Happy birthday, Logan.